Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Theta Ministries and Podcast. I'm your host, Wes. And today we're going to be talking about a book I finished. I think it was maybe a little bit less than maybe 2 weeks ago. I've been missing out on my podcast because I haven't known what to exactly, because I haven't finished a book every week. Sorry. But I have finished Mere Christianity, and that was something I wanted to review really quick for the channel. Now, given that it's a Sunday, I usually do my chapter readings, and then I do exposition or do exegesis. But today is going to be a little bit different. Today we're just going to talk about what I read in C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. So what my thoughts were going in to the book, I guess. C.S. Lewis, and I never really read Chronicles of Narnia. You may have heard of that series, though it's more of technically just a book. I don't think it's a series. I'm not caught up with all that stuff, so that's probably why I'm not very well versed in his works. But Mere Christianity was a solid book, given the name of the book. On the topic, it's Mere Christianity. So what else am I supposed to be expecting when it comes to just Mere Christianity? And basically, this book is about the core values of the Christian faith and its effect on society and Christian morals, and what is Christianity and the fundamentals of Christianity and the Christian worldview and the Christian faith. And it was fairly well put together. Me and C.S. Lewis agree on a lot. He talks about the popular, I'd say even more modern moral issues of the 1950s and 60s are still somewhat relevant today, like the whole gender sex distinction debate still going on amongst the secular society. That's a big thing at the moment. But it really shouldn't be a debate anyway. I'm going to get canceled for saying that. I know that. But it was a fairly well written book. For the time that it was written, you have to, this is something I learned recently, is when you're reading a book, right? You're reading a writer. Read what they're writing in the context of the time that they'd written that piece of history, literature. And C.S. Lewis, basically in the beginning of the book, starts off with saying, my goal when it comes to Christianity, this is just his words, I'm just paraphrasing here from memory from when I read it, but he basically says, Christianity is sort of like this mansion or this house, and basically the Lutherans have their own corridor, the Baptists have their own corridors, the Presbyterians have their own corridors, the Pentecostals have their own corridors, Roman Catholics have like the basement, Eastern Orthodox have the attic for some reason. But basically what Mere Christianity is basically trying to get you into the hallway of the house. That way you can find your own room to stay in. And that was very good. He managed to merge fellowship in an ironic Nicene fashion that I very much appreciated, and actually I agree with him on that. I don't like to see much separation. I only can say someone's not a brother if they don't hold to the essentials of the Christian faith. And so I like how he incorporated that to the beginning of his book. Now, moving on, he talks about his history as a Christian and how he was a former atheist, and his testimony coming out of atheism was a lot like mine. Questioning why even worry about morality at all if it's all subjective, and it makes me laugh because when I was reading that, I'm like, yeah, modern atheists are making a lot of claims about, they don't like the Old Testament or whatever God did to judge the nations in the Old Testament, or how he judged Israel or something like that. And I'm like, but isn't everything subjective? So why worry about that? Why would that be wrong at all if it's all subjective? And he did a really good, there's the popular line of from his book, how do I know what a crooked line is if I don't know what a straight line is? And he actually made several examples. That's not the only example he made in the book about objective and subjective morality. He also said, how do you know what the right version of an action is? The perversion of an action is, unless you know the true meaning and intention of that action is supposed to be. And I'm like, that's actually fairly well put point, and something I'd not even considered as an atheist when I was coming to Christianity, was he worded something in the proper way. And I'd always heard, how do you know if something's good or bad? That's how I had always heard it coming out of atheism. But he put it in an even more articulated position on that. So he did a very good job on that. Now, he also mentions his history as a just Anglican in terms of his church polity, in that it doesn't seem as though he was on the Reformed side of the Christian camp, which is, what, I get it. A lot of Christian writers are not on the Reformed side of anthropology or soteriology, and I get it, people have different perspectives in the Christian worldview. But so it's very interesting to read someone who you could very much tell when he talks about freedom of the will was not Reformed in any classical sense. If he was, then I couldn't see it in his writing. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt because I like his writing. His writing is actually very understandable. It's not super overly hyperly linguistic, but it's very simple, and yet you can understand what he's trying to say. And then he goes on basically in the book to talk about how Christian morality has affected society and affected politics, and how Christian leadership is what we need, and in considerations when it comes to sexual morality, politics, sexual ethics, general ethics, worldview ethics, and so forth. He said that it should all be based on the Christian worldview, which is I actually fundamentally agree with him on that. But anyway, overall, it was a very, well, obviously I listened to the audio version of it, so technically I read it, but didn't read it. But it was the audio version of the book, so technically I did read it. But the ending of the book was probably the greatest slam dunk. That says, and notice how at the end of the book he basically lists these grave sins. And he talks about pride as being the worst ones, and I actually fully agree with him on this. That pride is technically the root of all sin, and that pride is the worst sin. Although we can talk about the distinction between, how bad a sin actually is, or how is sin actually just sin. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion. Pride being the efficiently worst sin, because that leads to every other sin. It's the root. It's the foundation of every sin. And Scripture talks about, in Proverbs especially, over and over again, how pride is totally against the humility of heart in God, and I think I phrased that wrong. Anyway, I'm so tired. I haven't recorded a video in a while, so I wanted to knock this out of the way. But the last part of that entire book was C.S. Lewis saying he moved it from the conversation of pride to humility, and now humility is the entire Christian worldview, is that we have humility in God and what He's done through the Son, and then that trickles down into everything else that we do, like sexual ethics, like regular general ethics, like friendships, like relationships, like marriages. And the final part of the book is he has a slam dunk quote, and I forgot, I have to bring up the quote maybe later and put it in like a community post or something, but he says, humility is all summed up in Christ Jesus, because He was the most humble person ever. God who became man and humbled Himself unto the point of death. And we are called to be many Christs because we are called to be conformed to the image of His Son. And in doing so, we are humbled by that. Humbled by God's glory. We're humbled by what He's done in the Son. And therefore, our actions take upon humility. And in doing so, we reflect that. And that's also, in spreading the gospel, we show humility. And we say, none of us are good. No one is righteous. No, not one. In Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace are you saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. There's a constant theme in Proverbs. I think I just mentioned this a few minutes ago. That humility is the complete opposite of pride. In the midst of our rebellious nature, against our prideful and rebellious nature, humility is what destroys all of that. And that's why I love referring back to Luke 18 so much. Because that tax collector, all he could say was, have mercy on me. And that's the attitude we're called to have. Is humility in the Son of God. And so C.S. Lewis pounds it on the head for like the last quarter of the book. And constantly says, we are humble as Christ was humble. And that's what Christianity is all about, mere Christianity. Not a specific denomination, because there's different theological differences as to how God does things specifically, or the sacraments, or whatever else it may be. But the fundamental core of the gospel is humility in God. So, that'll be my review of C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity for now. It was in my opinion, one of the better books I've ever read. I've only recently, later in life, because of my interest in scholasticism as a Christian, I read books all the time as a kid. And you guys saw the video, maybe I put out, maybe, I don't know, 2 months ago, when I had the really long beard. And I've been growing it out since I last shaved it. So I haven't shaved since April, I don't think. But, so I'm trying to get my beard all the way back out to like a John Calvin type thing. But, yeah, so I've only really recently gotten back into reading books full time, and reading is so much more edifying than watching videos and watching debates, which I very much still love doing. But reading books is just a different type of research that you can't really beat. You kind of go to the source itself and say, what is this person trying to say to me? And so, if I were to put C.S. Lewis's book Mere Christianity on a rank of 1 to 10 on books I've ever read in my life, it would be up there with like the 8 through 10. It's up there. I've heard a lot of fellow other serious scholastic Christians like myself will very much discredit Lewis's approach, but I think Lewis was very practical in his approach to talking to non-believers and atheists. In a way that they could understand, because not everyone wants to hear about all the works of Augustine in a single sitting and think like, oh yeah, I want to come to the Christian faith because I just heard about Augustine or Luther or Irenaeus. I mean, that stuff's wonderful, but to them, they're just like, well, that's just another historical figure. Why are they important to me? The Christian scholastic guys like myself are the guys who care about that, which I think more people should care about it. But Mere Christianity, anyways, given the title of the book, is about the fundamental cores of Christianity and the Christian faith and how it affects our worldview. And I think C.S. Lewis did a seriously good job at addressing issues that even plague us today in 2024. So I guess I'm going to leave it off there. I will be reading Mark 2 instead this coming Wednesday, and we can definitely cover that. And yeah, I'm excited to do that because Mark 2 has a lot to talk about theologically on sola fide and justification by faith alone, and all that stuff. So, and fun fact, I moved, because some of you guys know I moved to a new house, and you guys can see that in my videos. And given that my new format is only audio, not video anymore, the place where I live now is actually my hometown, and I I now go to the Presbyterian church of my local town. And for some reason, the past couple of weeks, we just haven't been having the Eucharist at all, or or what you could call communion, or the Lord's Supper, whatever you want to call it. But we finally had the Eucharist today. It was pretty nice. It was pretty interesting. My first Eucharist as a Presbyterian. Never really got a whole lot as a non-denom Baptist. But it seems like the Presbyterian church that I go to takes it pretty seriously, which I do hold a spiritual presence view of Calvin, and I do hold the Paedo-Baptist view of most Presbyterians. Not the Federal Vision type of baptism, but the classical view on baptism of Presbyterians in a very nuanced fashion. I can be like a neo-Paedo-Baptist, I guess, in that sense, because you guys haven't heard my updated arguments yet for Presbyterian theology as a whole, or the church polity. But me explaining my positions in the specifics do a lot boil down to my sacramentology, and I've never really felt like arguing for my position, because sometimes I even feel like the majority of what I'm doing as a Christian YouTuber and a theologian and an apologist is to argue for merely in the same sense almost that Lewis does. It's just mere Christianity. It's not arguing for the Presbyterian church polity. It's not arguing for paedo-baptism. It's not arguing for the spiritual presence of the Lord in the Eucharist. It's mainly arguing for the tenets of the Christian faith that are most central to him, like justification by faith and some of my older arguments, well, my older videos in general, more about attacking other world religions and like Mormonism. I did a couple videos on Islam, and even atheism. But I think my true calling is in doing this, is talking about the core tenets of the Christian faith as to make them understandable to laymen. Because I was there once, I get it. And I'm hoping to eventually do my first debate. That'll be cool. I'd love to get myself to engage in that. And hopefully, and I might be hosting a debate on this channel as well soon. So a fellow Reformed brother wants to do a debate with, I think, a provisionist, and I might try to do one myself as well. So that'll be fun if I do get that set up. But I do have, if that works out, then yay, great. If not, oh well, we press forward, and we continue to put out content that is edifying for the body of Christ. And I'm also wondering, does anyone watching my video, if you've gotten to this point in the video and you're not already bored yet, do you guys enjoy a in-depth exegetical study of the Greek of certain texts? Because I certainly do. Like when I walked through John 1 and talked about the deity of Christ from John 1:1 to John 14. That was such a fun video I did. I could go through that and do it again if I or I've even thought about walking through so the other night, right? I have some friends, and we walked through John 6 together in the Greek, and we talked about Hokuse auton, and we talked about the drawing of the Father. And that's something I may actually want to touch upon now. I'll probably get a lot of hate for doing a Reformed video on John 6, because a lot of Christian YouTube is non-Reformed, and I fully get the critique there. But having the Greek right in front of you as a Christian is just so unbelievably helpful. In the early 500s, let's give that a fair date, not nearly as many Christians back then had the full Greek New Testament sitting right in front of them that we do now. And now that we have technology, we have infinite amount of paper and books openly available to the public. We don't hide anything. And we put the Christian faith out there for everyone to see. And when I'm like, when we read the New Testament, I've started to lean more, this sounds almost hilarious, but Greek text onlyism, which I'm not making that a serious claim. But what I mean by that, in a real conservative fashion, and reasonable fashion, I think, is to always, when you're looking at the core of a word being translated into, whether it be English or German or Spanish, go to the Greek words first. Go to the Greek words first, and then look at the English. You can look at the genitive forms of words, the plural forms of words, etc. Or the nominative form of words. When you have that, the text becomes so clear. So anyway, I could walk through John 6 as well through the Greek. I can walk through Romans. I can walk through Ephesians, Philippians, Acts, whatever else it may be. So I hope we can keep on doing that, and as well as walking through every book of the Bible. Maybe I have to do the series on Mark, finish Mark, and then do my series on Philippians. I did Philippians 1, and I think I did mention in Philippians 1 how it did help me become reformed. I think it was verse 29 that helped when and also First Clement. If I'm not going to try to make the claim that maybe it was a reference to Philippians 1, but Clement does mention being granted to believe in his one of his epistles. So I find it interesting how Philippians definitely talks about the elect and granted unto salvation and so forth. But yeah, that's something I can also get about. I'm yapping at this point. It's not relevant, but I hope this has been a helpful review of C.S. Lewis's book and a quick little update as well. And I like this format much more than I like doing the whole face format, because one, my bedroom does not have the proper equipment for an actual recording studio. Neither does it have the room for it. And the Chromebook just looked weird. I didn't like it. And the mic sounded kind of far off. If the mic sounds like a genuine podcast mic, and I have a good camera angle for my room, then great. But the cutoff of my camera screen with my bookcase with my old iPhone, I'd rather just not do that. So we're going to keep it simple. Just keep it audio for now. and we can continue from there. And regardless, you're still hearing me preach the gospel. You're still hearing me go through texts that are maybe complicated or very simple, and the work that I plan to do for my ministry is still coming through, I hope. And maybe I could even, well, I probably will end up just doing Mark chapter 2 on Wednesday, and then do my next book review on the following Wednesday, and just do Mark 2 and 3. We'll see how this works out, but if this works out the way I want it to, then I'll be happy. I'm just tired of putting it off. I've been so lazy recently with my ministry. I feel kind of bad, which is why I needed to hop on tonight after a previous chapter study on Mark chapter 10. I was like, I need to catch up on my ministry. I should already be at Mark 5 by now. So anyway, so I love you all, and I will talk to you later. And you know what I always say, Godspeed.